The opposite of coping is savoring. Savoring. If you think about it, those moments where you look at the sunrise or something, or you're having a nice dinner with a loved one, wow, it's a really great, sweet set of moments we got there, isn't it? That's savoring. That's savoring. It turns out savoring is the opposite of coping. So if one was being forced to cope a lot, they would have to eventually learn the skill of savoring to keep any money in the coping bank account, so to speak.
Right? No, that makes sense. Yeah.
You can only cope so much.
Hi, and welcome to the Bouncing Back Podcast. I'm your host, Melissa McCurley, and after my own battle with autoimmune disease, I created this podcast to share strategies, tools, and inspiring stories for other professionals navigating life and business with chronic illness. If you haven't yet joined our Facebook community, please check out Bouncing Back Podcast, where we continue this conversation. I am incredibly excited to introduce to you our guest today, Les McGehee. He is a speaker, author, coach, thought leader, and serial entrepreneur. His journey started with professional improv and comedic acting that evolved into business training with clients from NASA to HBO, Disney to Keller Williams, and so many more. He co-created the training certification program for Gary Keller's best-selling book, The One Thing. Les is also certified in positive psychology from UPenn, and he's a cancer survivor. He's incorporated these lessons in grit, positive mindset, and strategy in his current career endeavor, Rialto Academy, an online education campus that trains over 500,000 real estate professionals. So welcome back to part 2 with Les McGehee. Last time, again, real quick, we covered his cancer diagnosis, how that showed up in his life, the power of his community, coaches, and that showed up for him with insight, and then the network of people around him who brought, angels to him at the right time, as well as the power of humor as not just a tool, but as a part of our humanity for all of life's experiences. So bringing that forward, Les, welcome again. We'll pick up our conversation where we left it last time. I guess you began to touch on positive psychology, your experience with that, and then bringing forward all the wisdom you got from your health journey into what you're doing today, what you've done since then. Let's pick up with that.
Yeah, so positive psychology is very interesting to me. And my main comedy company that I did a lot of my business with, I started that in 1986 as a big partnership, and it became mine over the subsequent few years and things like that. And in the process of doing that, I've been very fortunate to learn a lot of different things. And when folks saw the way we were performing and the way we put humor, interactive humor, at the time they would call it clean comedy, and that's because it was TV acceptable levels of profanity. We tend to be a PG outfit, and everybody would come up with their own understanding for why we were PG. Some folks would say, oh, they're Christian, or they're into family clean or whatever. And we'd be like, man, we're just people that like creativity and want to work on TV. And if you go hear a stand-up show, you will hear in most stand-ups, you will hear incredible amounts of repetition in the curse word category. And you have to wonder if it wouldn't be uncommon to hear the same word, say, 75 times in a short stand-up set. And you have to wonder, even if it was a Nobel Prize winner, if they said Nobel Prize 75 times, you'd probably be sick of that too, right? So we really
kind of loses impact.
Yeah, a little bit of variety and diversity. So when we started doing shows, folks didn't understand how we were performing. We were very much pioneers at the time. There were very few people doing professional improv comedy. And yet when they saw it, they would have ideas. And so I lived in a world where people would have a great idea, seeing that, and I would encourage that idea. A lot of conversations started with, I have this crazy idea. What y'all do with this improv comedy? What if we brought you in to help the nurses at the VA hospital? And I'd be able to say, over time, I learned how to say, oh, wow, what an interesting idea. Not, I've done that 10 times and it works and here's a handout on it. So I say, hey, what a great idea. So you honor people's ideas and things like that, right? So I get requested to do workshops and different sorts of appearances and solve some very interesting problems, right? That they did not go to me first. When NASA or Veterans Health or USDA or any of the major universities that have hired me, when they come to me, I would get to know them a little bit, and eventually we'd come around to a question. We'd say, is it okay if we have a discussion over who you tried to hire or who you hired that failed, that you ended up with me? You know, I'm gonna,
who was the A-team?
Yeah, right. You have an expert. You're in a huge organization. You probably already hired the person who wrote the best book on the subject. Maybe there's a famous scientist, and I guess they all failed, and somebody said, Les is pretty good. You ought to try him. And so if we could talk openly about that, I'll do my best for you. So while that was happening, Melissa, something that we would say is that we could see what we were working with and how it benefited everybody in the positive psychology sense, yet there was no science and very little literature on it. And so we would regularly say, oh, won't it be amazing 10 or 20 years from now when the scientists come in behind us and explain what all this is and why it works so dependably and why it's so good for people, why it helps them live longer and to thrive, and they'll explain that. Okay, so meanwhile, while I'm running around doing thousands of these performances in 15 different countries and things like that, there's a professional man named Martin Seligman. And Martin Seligman is one of the famous psychologists who actually helped to create some of the core concepts and cures to some of the psychological disorders. There's a little more than a dozen diagnosed psychological disorders, including learned helplessness, which is the opposite of what I do. And it turns out one of the things, amongst others, that Martin was an expert in was the concept of learned helplessness. And he developed that into the concept of, does that mean that there could be learned optimism? That people could actually learn how to be more optimistic, even in specific situations. And I'll paraphrase Dr. Seligman. I'll paraphrase him. He says, I had spent so much time diagnosing and helping people get back up towards zero in their life psychologically that I began to wonder how come there wasn't more above zero for people to thrive and to purposefully do positive things.
Wow. Right? What an insight.
I think of course I think so. Of course I think it's an amazing, life-changing thing. And so when I found the literature, I'm like, oh, this is the convergence. This is where science converges with what I've known since I was 11 years old and have been offering to definitely entertain millions of people. And I'm like, oh, this is so great. These people are so smart. So I immediately began reading Martin's books, some books some of your ambitious and smart audience members will recognize is, say, Angela Duckworth, who wrote the book Grit, which has a great many lessons for those of us who have ongoing health concerns. Angela is one of Martin's students. She was a student at the University of Pennsylvania program. And some other people like that. Yeah, also Dr. Laurie Santos. I took her program at Yale. She's the people refer to it as the happiness course. She calls it the science of well-being. And it tells us a great many things about why some things make us happy and why some things that we pursue in the name of happiness simply don't contribute to anybody's happiness at all. And so I jumped into the opportunity to study that positive psychology, and the idea that I did that while fighting cancer simultaneously was a real blessing. That was a real blessing that I had that much power, access to information, and motivation to help others. And I helped myself quite a bit while doing that.
It's interesting. What an amazing message to surround yourself with at such a dark time. You know, when you originally said that in our previous podcast about how you either retreat or advance, I thought, how in the world, like just physically, would you be able to do a course of study while going through something that is so physically grueling? My first thought was like, did you do it online? Like, the logistics of how, but I hadn't even considered the fact that just surrounding yourself with that kind of mindset, the empowerment it would create for you to be able to sustain and go through a challenge, It's like loading your body with nutrition and juicing and amazing things when you're going to go on a grueling journey.
I would say it's very much like that. Yeah, it was nutrition for the thought process, and options for ways to look at things that were empowering and not disabling. I do a regular short broadcast called Mindset on Mindset, Les McGehee Mindset. I do it on Mondays. I like doing it on Monday mornings. So Les McGehee Mindset Mondays. And we describe a couple of simple rules. We say one rule of our time together is that we believe we have a choice in how to look at things. Okay. And yes, when you look at things in certain ways, the things themselves change. Your relationship to those things change. So our only rules are that we believe there's more than one honest and truthful way to look at a thing, and that we're going to get good at thinking in such a way that we choose the way that works best for what we're intending to do. Right. And that greatly increases success and happiness and satisfaction. And authentic happiness is a phrase you hear a lot in positive psychology. For instance, we all would love a box of $1 million, box of money on the doorstep tomorrow or in 5 minutes. That'd be all right. Yet that $1 million means different things to all of us. And if it's attached to your authentic values, it's probably going to feel incredibly valuable. And if it's not attached to your authentic values, I think we all know somebody who made a bunch of money and we watched it turn from a valuable thing into an annoying bit of cabbage that complicated their life. Right. And so the positive psychology folks, they really helped me to embrace some things about that. And they gave me a half a dozen tools. I would love to mention a few of these tools to share them with your audience. They mentioned some tools to me and the mindset perspective, choice of perspective, that's definitely one of the tenets they go by. And that if you change the way you look at things, the things themselves change, and you do have options for how to look at things. That is definitely an empowering thing from that. And there are things that can nurture that. Let's try a couple of them. You want to?
Okay. Yeah, absolutely.
A floor underneath all this, a basic concept is PERMA, is what Dr. Seligman and Angela Duckworth and Dr. Santos, they would all agree on this sort of thing. So PERMA is a nice rubric for remembering what our game is about. And our game is about positive emotion, engagement, relationships, meaning, and achievement.
Okay. I love all those things.
And once you've had a little meaning and achievement, positive emotion gets easier. And so the whole thing rolls like a wheel with momentum, right? So we do believe in it. And some ways to grow PERMA in your life and to support it. One of my favorite ways is what went well and why. Very simple exercise that Dr. Seligman, I think he's the one that created this one. What went well and why? So after doing something, a person can ask themselves, what went well about that? And you identify things that went well about it. It turns out it parallels a thing we had done in the comedy show thousands of times, which is we were doing so many shows. At our peak, we were doing up to maybe 600 comedy events a year. Right.
Wow.
And we're avid growth-oriented people. So how do you do that? How do you iterate and get better when you have another show in 30 minutes? How does one do that? Right. So we came up with a 5-minute note session, and it was not allowed to go more than 4 or 5 minutes. We didn't have time for that. And so in that note session, the first thing you do is you identify things that went well. What are some things that went well that we're keeping in our minds and hearts? Those things went well. Okay, great. If someone has a favorite thing, they can talk about it, but we need to identify 1 or 2 things we're going to take into workshop, write it down, and then go do the next show. Right.
Okay.
And so what went well and why is very similar to that. What went well is I went to the store. What went well? Why did that go well? Yeah, good to know. So all we're doing is regularly, because folks might be walking around ruminating about their illness, ruminating about their challenges, ruminating about money and concern and things like that. What went well and why is a couple of seconds of exercise that reminds us that we're people that can see things going well and we can tell why they go well. We are not untethered from that. We get it. The world does make a reasonable amount of sense when you notice things that go well and why they go well. And so that is that is a very strong foundational exercise within positive psychology. What went well and why? And you can do that really big. What went well with 2025 and why did that go
Gotcha.
well? You could do that. Or I could say, the salad I had at the cafe yesterday was really good. I love the way they make their salads. What went well? The salad was dependable, on time. It was what I love when I get there. Why did it go well? Because they hire people of good character and they know how to keep customers coming back.
I
Okay?
bet over
It's that
time that
simple.
wires your brain to notice what's working instead of what's not working, which is what we tend to want to notice, particularly if we're in a place of challenge.
I think that's a beautiful way to describe it. Yeah. Yeah. We're strengthening neural pathways
Yeah.
that are the opposite of this is horrible. I'm overwhelmed and I can't tell why anything happens.
Yeah.
Another
Which is pretty disempowering. Yeah.
Yeah, and we're strengthening neural pathways that are going to help us, that are going to be more active when we're choosing a way to look at things. They're going to speak up for themselves, right?
Yes.
Yeah, what went well and why? That's definitely a great one. Another one that I really is, and for people, I'm so grateful for what you do for your audience, Melissa.
Oh,
And
thank
the
you.
one thing I think will really help them is coping. All right, coping. And I had a good lesson personally with this, with my cancer experience, yet also I was helping some organizations in the Carolinas when they had a horrible hurricane hit them and flood them. And while they were
Yeah.
digging out of that hurricane, another one hit them and flooded them
Oh,
again. And they just got smashed. They were all standing in waist deep mud, wondering how anything was going to work right again. And then I showed up with my belief in humor, and I have to tell them these messages about how to think positively. And there's very little of an obvious nature for them to think positively about in that moment, right? Here's the truth underneath it. A lot of the positive psychology and psychology in general have mapped out human character traits quite a bit. It's a little bit like the chart of the elements in chemistry now. There are
okay.
24 character traits. They're in 6 categories and things like this, right? And some of them have opposites. They're on the same plane and they have opposites. So coping, the opposite of coping is savoring. Savoring.
Mm.
If you think about it, those moments where you look at the sunrise or something, or you're having a nice dinner with a loved one or something like this, and you're like, wow, that's a really great, sweet set of moments we got there, isn't it? That's savoring. That's savoring. It turns out savoring is the opposite of coping. So if
Yeah.
one was being forced to cope a lot, they would have to eventually learn the skill of savoring to keep any money in the coping bank account, so to speak,
No, that
right?
makes
Because you can only
sense.
cope,
Yeah.
yeah, you can only cope so much. And they would say, give me, hey, smart Alec, give me some ideas what I'm supposed to be savoring while waist deep in mud, the school is closed and I can't get groceries and there's no electricity. You know? And I would have to tell them the truth, right? Which is that I don't know. I don't know. Yet if you look around you, I can give you some ideas, right? You probably see somebody helping somebody. You probably see somebody making peace with what's happened to them. You probably see people showing up wishing they could help with servant hearts and things like that. Maybe you're noticing that while everything else is trashed, the sky is beautiful, right?
Yep.
I don't want to sound like Pollyanna, yet I will say that if you don't put deposits in your coping bank account, you could go bankrupt on coping. And so I do remind people savoring. Savoring is a skill, it's a choice. You have to allow it, much like yours and my conversation about humor. You have to allow savoring to happen. And sometimes under great duress, like illness or disaster, it can seem like there's nothing to savor. Yet I would remind people that if they don't find simple things to savor, they will run out of cope.
That makes sense. Even things like that story I told last time with my mom having drive me somewhere, even just savoring that time with my mom, right?
Yeah.
One day I won't have my mom and I won't be able to savor any kind of moment with her. So there's
And
always
you had your
something
mama at your time of need. You had your
at a time
mama.
who loves to nurture, right? So if she could just take care of the girls all the time, she'd love it. So you're right. There's always something to dig into, with that's really
Well, and we can,
very
you
deep.
know, you help people in very important categories, Melissa, but let's say we were just talking about business achievement. A lot of our friends who are flogging themselves with some immutable business goal that they are imagining, they also need to learn how to savor, right?
Yeah.
So it's just degrees of importance, right? In my example, it was existential, yet it doesn't change the fact that savoring is the opposite of coping. And so it can strengthen your ability to cope
Yeah.
if you're one who knows how to savor. That takes me to one of my favorites. Okay, what we're looking for is opportunities to show persistence and passion in an environment of gratitude. That is a
That's
large
juicy.
portion. That's the whole thing, really. We desire to pound the rock and hit that rock, like the Stonecutter's credo, Jacob Riis. They pound the rock every day the best way we know how. That implies that we have thought it through. Our life has meaning. We have choice, and we have chosen an endeavor to apply ourselves to. And we're going to pound that rock, and we're going to do it with persistence. And because it has meaning for us, if anything gets in the way of our persistence, passion can take over for a couple of days. That'll be okay. We're going to do it anyway. Okay. Yet we primarily live in persistence. Yet if something gets in the way of persistence, passion's going to make me do it anyway. Things are going to happen anyway. Right.
Yeah.
And then put that activity pattern in an environment of gratitude. And this is what confuses a lot of people, because gratitude is a passive word, right? Persistence, you can persist as a verb. You can show passion. We know what passion looks like. We recognize it, we feel it and see it in people and things like that. Yet gratitude, if you say gratifying, you're accidentally opening up other subject matters that maybe have nothing to do with what you're talking about. Yet somehow expressing gratitude. Laurie Santos points out that in terms of neural activity and how it feels in our brain, for me to go make $5 more or spend $5 on myself, if I were to give that $5 to somebody who I feel deserves it, it turns out the reward is about the same in size. Okay. So $5 I spend on myself may or may not give me some happiness and satisfaction. $5 I give to somebody who deserves it, and somehow it has a connection to my authentic values and passion. That is a pretty dependable deposit in the happiness bank.
Yeah.
Right there. Right.
Yeah.
So gratitude is an interesting thing. And you and I know a great many people who say, I live in gratitude. Can you hear how passive that is? So one thing we can do is we can help people understand how to express gratitude in ways that benefit everybody. With me, I like feeding people quite a bit. I like doing my humor work. I would never turn down a group that deserved my humor work just because they couldn't afford me or something like that.
Yeah.
Right? I'm not going to let the dollar be my boss in that way. That'd be a horrible choice, right?
Yeah.
And so we're looking for environments where we can indulge persistence and passion and be grateful people. Those things, our positive psychology friends would point out. Let's say a kid arrives at a new school and that kid gets an A on a math test right away that all the other kids struggle with. Some people are going to look at that kid and go, wow, what a great accomplishment. Way to go. Red plus A++ on the paper, stuff like that. Yet if we look at what really leads to happiness and success, one could say we have no earthly idea if that kid's on a good path or not until we can see whether or not they understand persistence and passion and gratitude. Yeah. Those things really do describe human success. They really do, as opposed to maybe he just had a good math teacher the year before and the other kids didn't, or something like that. The kid who showed persistence and improved their math grade that year, that kid's probably
That's
more likely to be happy and succeed, even though the other kid got higher marks.
makes
Right.
sense.
These are the things that we're trying, and positive psychology helped to highlight these things. And so they
Okay.
brought it to our attention. Let's see, I have two more I'll share if you
Okay.
let
Yeah.
me get. I realize we're using
Absolutely.
all our time. Opportunities is going to be, and there's a book about it that's a challenging book to read called The Obstacle is the Way. And it's a concept that comes all the way from Roman times. Yet one can reasonably say that, to do it as a metaphor, I'm walking down a path and I come up on the path. There's a huge boulder on the path. Okay. So can I move the boulder out of my way? Can I go under it? Can I go over it? What can be done? So let's recognize that the obstacle has given me the information. I may not want to go
Mm.
get a truck. I may not want to go over it or something like that, but it's not like it didn't give me the answer. The obstacle is the way. It turns out that the one person is standing there going, shoot, we can't do anything because we can't move it, we can't go under it, we can't go over it. And another person is looking at it going, oh, clearly the only way to do this is to move it, go under it, or go over it. Right? The
Right.
obstacle is the way, and the obstacle very
That's
often gives
interesting.
you an answer. Yet if you're not someone who believes that you have a choice of perspectives, that obstacle can look overwhelming as opposed to
Mm.
informative. Now, relate that to you and I talking to people who might be in illness, right? So, cancer for me was an immovable object. It was an immovable object, yet it gave me a way forward. It did give me a way forward. There were very few options, right? All I had to do was admit that the obstacle was telling me about the only way forward was to double and triple down on the things that I believed most importantly about humanity and health.
Right.
Right. And so the obstacle is the way. And here's a little tool your folks can play with as well. Take a look at an app called WOOP. It's fun. Positive psychology has the
I'll
benefit of
write that
being a
down.
little lighthearted. WOOP, WOOP, created by a Dr. Gabrielle Ottingen, if I remember correctly. And WOOP stands for Wish Outcome Obstacle Plan. So when we think back to the 1930s and we had Napoleon Hill and Think and Grow Rich, and that was the beginning of understanding how important belief and psychology was to the actions that we're actually going to take in this life and whether or not we're going to succeed in things and manifest positive change and things like that, right? But they didn't know everything. It was 1937. They were doing their best, for goodness sake. Give them a break, okay? And
I
so
had to
this
start
idea,
somewhere.
yeah, it was the beginning of, hey, how you think has to do with how well you're going to succeed. That was a relatively new concept, right? And that you have choices of how to think. That was a pretty new concept they turned us on to. And now, flash forward, Ms. Ottingen in a wish outcome obstacle plan. Wish and outcome are very much like what we learned from the original literature in Think and Grow Rich, is that if you have a really strong desire for something
Mm.
you'd like to see happen and you can visualize achieving it, you will have a great head start at manifesting it and following the cues that will allow that to become into reality. What could go wrong? That would be the second O there, obstacle. So if you think, is there an obvious obstacle that could get in the way? If so, what's a plan for that? Okay, let's go. So that's all it is, right? It's wish, outcome, obstacle, plan. I have a friend who just worked really hard to lose 35 pounds and
Wow.
redo their body chemistry, and very, very proud of it. And they were really freaked out about the holidays, and there was a family
Mm.
wedding. And they were particularly freaked out because the family wedding was making grandma's Italian cream cake. And this person is crazy for grandma's Italian cream cake. And so they had a wish, they had an outcome. They could picture themselves healthy in the new year and wearing the clothes they had bought for themselves and things like that. The obstacle was grandma's Italian cream cake. So I'll need a little plan for. Let's not get knocked down by the most obvious obstacle I already know is coming, right?
Right.
So what's my plan for that? And his plan for that was after they cut the cake and we applaud and they start putting it on plates. That's when I go walk around the building a couple of times.
Mm.
Right? It was just a simple. It's that little. It is that little. But wish, outcome, obstacle plan will help a great many people,
Okay.
And
this is in an app form?
yeah, it's a lovely
Okay.
app, WOOP, very
Okay.
easy to use. It's also free
Okay.
and very easy to use. The Happiness podcast by Laurie Santos, I also recommend that to everybody. Listen to Laurie. Laurie understands the principles behind positive psychology and increase of happiness and success. Success is, I'll shut up after this, Melissa, yet success is also interesting. You realize success, the leading definition in Webster's is going to be getting what you want. So in other words, if one doesn't know what they want, one does not have success available to them. Right.
That makes sense.
And if somebody does know what they want, they do have success available to them. Now, there's other things that could happen. Surprise, you won the lottery. Here's a box of money. Right. I guess that would check a box off of something on our success list, perhaps. But success is attached to understanding your own values. Things that have authentic value to us are valuable, and things that don't have authentic value to us, they're not valuable. And it doesn't matter how many zeros they have on them or what they're made of. That's authentic success we're looking for. And I believe that helps us to see it in others. That everybody's walking around with this unique set of gifts and authentic values, and it's an amazing thing. Their strengths are amazing. There's 24 strengths. Go to Via Character Institute, and take the strength survey, and it'll tell you what your top 5 strengths are. Those are called signature strengths because the quantity and mix of those top 5 strengths is unique to you, like your pupil or your thumbprint or something like that, your voice.
Oh, that's interesting. I love a good, with being in real estate, we all take the Myers-Briggs, we have all these different philosophies for hiring in the quiz, but I've not heard, it's always directed to productivity, right?
Melissa, I look forward to you identifying what your top 5 strengths are and us having a 5-minute conversation, and I'll let you know some ways to use them. And when you're using your top 5 strengths, there is no competing with you in that category of things that are most important to you. There is no competing with you. You're in the middle of your authenticity. Folks should know what their top 5 strengths are. They might admire some other strengths that they've been using, yet knowing your top 5 strengths is incredibly advantageous. And the more you use them, the better your outcomes tend to be. And that shows up in happiness. Let's repeat PERMA for everybody. It's just positive emotion, engagement, relationships, meaning, and achievement.
Where can people find you? Where can they, if they want to go deeper, learn more about your background, your training, all these different certifications that you have that might be some rabbit holes they want to go down? This might be a direction for them to make meaning out of their health journey. Where can we find out more?
I am at my education company that has 500,000 realtors on it at any given time. That's Rialto Academy, RIALTO Academy. And we are deep into education. We love learning. We love helping people learn. We love watching entrepreneurs succeed because they get learning and things like that. My labor of love lives in my education business and also in my private business. My other company is called McGehee Authentic Company. And that's where folks hire me to come out and speak on my book and solve other issues for them that need upbeat humor strategies. I have about 1,000 interactive games I created over the years. And have so much mileage on me. I can see the human condition and usually be very helpful. Anybody who would like to help others with any of these tools is welcome to ask me for help. And any organization that can tell their organization and their people would benefit and thrive if they could have more of this message, they are invited to hire me. And I am both expensive and flexible for the deserving because what I have helps people.
Wow, that's amazing. And we'll link all this in the bio below, but for those driving, I just wanted to touch on that. Thank you so much. I can't even tell you how appreciative that I am for your time and your story. Any parting words?
Yes, Melissa, I think what you're doing is an amazing thing. And those of you that are listening to Melissa, there's a reason. It's not random. okay? And take that goodwill and the power and strength that you're gaining from this and do something kind for somebody else. If they don't have enough food, feed them. Or if they just need a hand with someone, help them. You will benefit at least as much as they will. And we appreciate you being kind to other people and respecting and loving the authenticity and the gifts each of us were given in their unique combinations. And Melissa, I think what you're doing supports that greatly, and I appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you, Les. Thanks. That means a lot. And yes, pay it forward. That's what I'm trying to do from my experience and all the gifts I receive from other people and support, for sure.
Melissa, generous people should pay it forward. Selfish people should pay it forward, though, because it benefits them more than the other person. So selfish people, they should pay it forward.
We should all pay it forward. We should all pay it forward. Sounds good. Well, thanks so much, everyone, for tuning in. Please rate, review, and share this podcast. It helps us get the word out so much. We'll be back in 2 weeks with more inspiring stories of success. So until then, keep bouncing back. If these stories of strength and comeback hit home, you'll want to hear what's next. Click the video on screen to keep learning from our incredible guests on how to bounce back and thrive.